Hello everyone and welcome to our step-by-step demo of Mango Premiere, the first and only language learning resource to teach through feature films and other foreign language multimedia. Mango Premiere takes a really unique approach to language learning because it actually combines entertainment with education. So the first thing a user is going to be able to do when they log in is select a movie from our collection of films. I've selected Kung Fu Dunk, which is a film in Mandarin Chinese. Then the next thing I'm going to do is select how I want to watch the film. There are two different modes I can pick from, movie mode and engage mode. In movie mode, I'm going to be able to watch the entire film from beginning to end with my choice of subtitles. There are three different subtitle options. I could watch it with English subtitles only, which is exactly like you'd see at the movie theater. Or for more advanced students, I could watch it with just subtitles in the language that I'm learning. Or I could turn on both. And if I want to get a more in-depth learning experience, I can watch the film in engage mode. In engage mode, Mango breaks the movie down into individual scenes to teach the dialogue part by part. And we're going to get grammar and culture lessons along the way as well. So for today's demo, I'm going to select engage mode and turn on both English and Mandarin subtitles. And we'll go ahead and get started. So there are 5 steps to the learning process in engage mode. First is scene introduction, then view scene, scene follow-up, scene replay, and finally scene completion. Right now we're in the first step, which is scene introduction. The purpose of this step is to prepare the student for what he or she is going to learn in the following scene. There are 3 main features to look out for. The first is introduction slides. These slides essentially provide the student with a high-level overview of what's going on in the scene. All of the notes are provided in English, as well as the language that the student is learning, with color mapping to indicate translations and introduce the student to sentence structure, word order, and grammar. I'm going to go over the color mapping feature in more depth in just a minute. The next thing that we provide the student with is a whole list of words that they may encounter during the scene. And for each of these vocab words, we're going to provide the translation as well as a phonetic pronunciation, and if they click on the word, they're going to get the audio.
我
And then finally down here at the bottom, we provide the student with culture notes. If you're familiar with Mango at all, you know that culture learning is a core part of our methodology. We believe that the student's not getting a complete holistic language learning experience unless they're learning a little bit about the culture as well. So we incorporate culture notes into all of our products. So you can see that this particular scene has 9 culture notes. And because the film is focused on basketball, this first culture note here talks about the rise in popularity of basketball in China. This particular scene also features a Mandarin hip-hop song, so there's another note that talks about the hip-hop music scene in China. So as you can see, we're trying to provide the student with really current, relevant information that's going to interest them and draw them into the language learning experience. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with what we can expect to see in the scene, let's go ahead and watch it. Alright, so we're not going to watch the whole scene right now, but as you can see, the product pretty much mirrors the feeling you'd get if you were watching a movie on Netflix or at the movie theater. We were extremely selective in our content creation process, so our team focused on looking for movies that users will actually want to watch and also ones that are ideal for language learning. So I paused here so I can highlight a few of the features that you're going to see in this step. The first is subtitle selection. So again, you can customize your experience and select the subtitles that you want to use. You can pick from English subtitles, subtitles only in the target language, or you can turn on both. And you can also choose whether to activate our optional color coding feature. So as you can see right now, I've turned on both with the optional color coding. This is probably the best mode for a student who's new to learning the language. However, if the student is more advanced, they may choose to turn off the English subtitles completely and just use Mandarin subtitles. I've personally had a few years of German instruction, but sometimes when I'm watching a German film or TV show, the actor might speak too quickly or in an accent that I can't quite understand. So having the ability to turn on the target language subtitles only would be very helpful to me without giving everything away. So again, this feature makes Mango Premiere a really great learning tool for students of all levels. So now let's go ahead and let's talk briefly about the color coding feature, or semantic color mapping as we call it here at Mango. Now, the first and most obvious thing that this feature does is provide students with a clear and easy way to visualize and understand translations from the target language. As we can see, words of the same color mean the same thing. So I can easily tell without understanding any Mandarin Chinese at all, which I really can assure you that I don't. I can tell that this little blue character here means I. And if I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which I'm not, I can actually hover over the word to get its phonetic pronunciation. And if I want to hear it spoken at a slower, more enunciated pace by a native speaker, I just click on it.
我
Now, the cool thing about our semantic color mapping feature is that it doesn't just teach translations. It also introduces the student to word order and grammar. So to show you what I mean, I'm going to go over to the sentence down here. So as we can see, looking at the color coding, we can tell that with this first sentence, English follows the same word order as Mandarin Chinese. I recognize them. But in the second sentence, they are all hooligans, it doesn't follow the same word order as Mandarin Chinese. Now, one other thing I want to point out before we move on is that if the student wants to watch this film in full screen mode, they can just click on that icon over there. So now I know you probably want to watch the rest of the scene and see what happens, but there's a lot more features to show. So let me go ahead and move on to the next step, which is follow-up. So once the student has watched the entire scene, we're going to break down the scene's dialogue into individual sequences to teach it to the student part by part. If you're familiar with Mango already, it's worth noting that the methodology that we use to teach students here is exactly the same as the methodology that we use in our existing products. So you're going to see all the same features that you know and love. We've just adapted it to teach in the context of film. So as you can see, each scene has a decent amount of dialogue, so there's a lot of content for the student to dive into. However, one of the nice things about the user experience is that they don't have to necessarily learn in a linear fashion. So if they understood one part of the dialogue but not another, they can just simply dive into the sections that they want to study further. So let's go ahead and go into this first sequence here, which is going to start with a culture note.
Basketball,
篮球
in Chinese, was introduced to China in the late 19th century and was widely played in public in the Republic era, 1911 to 1949. Its rapid development in communist China was impeded by the socio-political turmoil in the late 1950s and 60s. Not until the marketization of domestic teams in the 1990s and introduction of the NBA game and stars did basketball become a national sport for Chinese. Afterwards, NBA shining stars such as Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are extremely welcomed among Chinese young people. Nowadays, it is one of the most popular and accessible games in China.
So now that we've learned a little cultural tidbit, the first thing we're going to present the student with is the full line of dialogue from the scene.
我认识他们的，全都是无赖。
So as you can see, the slide plays the corresponding clip from the movie. And what's nice about this is that the student can experience all of the content from the film at two different paces. The actor is obviously speaking at a normal conversational pace, but if the student chooses, he or she can click on each word within the dialogue to hear it spoken at a slower, more enunciated pace by a native speaker. So you're going to see all of the same features here that you saw earlier. So we've got the semantic color mapping, we've got phonetic pop-ups, and then if you click on each individual character, you're going to get the individual audio for that word as well. Now, if I want to hear the whole line again, I just simply click on the replay button over here, and it's going to replay the line exactly as it appears in the film. So after presenting the line in full, what we're going to do is we're going to start breaking it down part by part so that the student can understand the individual words.
Listen and repeat the following,
认得
which means,
To recognize,
So first we learned that to recognize is 认得.
here is how you would say, I, me.
我
So then we learned that I or me is 我.
Now, can you figure out the best way to say,
I recognize.
All right, so what we're challenging the student to do now is put together the pieces of information that we already taught them. Now, if the student needs more time to answer this question, they simply click on this little clock icon that I'm clicking on right now, and it's going to add more time for them. So we already learned that to recognize is 认得, and I is 我. And if you remember, when we watched the scene earlier, we talked about how the semantic color mapping taught us that for this particular line, Mandarin Chinese followed the same word order as English. So knowing all of that, the student can surmise that the phrase I recognize is 我认得. And when they're ready to view the answer, they just click on the I icon and it's going to give them the answer.
我认得
All right, so great. So the reason that we quiz the student on this material right after teaching it to them is because we want to accommodate for what we call the forgetting curve. And I think that's best explained as that feeling that you get right after you meet someone at a party and 5 minutes later you can't remember their name. I'm sure this has happened to all of us. Well, learning a foreign language is like meeting hundreds of different people and being expected to remember all of their names. It just isn't going to happen unless there's something that prompts you to remember. So that's why we build regular quizzes of previously taught material all throughout the chapter. Now, before I move on to the next slide, I want to talk about this little pop-up feature on the right. Now, this is a great new feature that we're planning to roll out with Mango Premiere that actually allows the student to track their progress as they move through the film. Now, this ties into this little progress bar that you see at the top of the screen, and it tracks the student's exposure in 4 key areas: vocabulary, phrases, grammar, and culture. So let's go ahead and let's go back here and let's say that we got it. And ta-da, we get 3 brain power points. And that's going to play into the total number of points that we have tracking for phrases. Now there's one more thing I want to point out before I move on, and that's these green icons that you may have noticed right here. Now what this means is that that sequence contains either a culture or a grammar note. And if you click on the icon, it's going to take the student straight to the note. So again, it's another way that we allow the student to customize their learning experience. So let's say that they don't really want to go through all the individual sequences to learn the dialogue, but they do want to get the relevant grammar and culture lessons. All they do is click on the note and it's going to take them right there. So now as you can see here, every scene contains quite a bit of language learning content. But again, it's completely up to the individual student to decide how much or how little they want to engage with the scene. They can break down, study, and quiz themselves on whichever parts of the scene they feel like they'd like to review. And once they're ready, the tool is going to prompt them to view the scene again. But this time, the student is going to view the scene through new eyes, since they've already had the chance to go through, learn, and review the dialogue. And perhaps this time, they may even want to choose to turn off the English subtitles completely to make the viewing experience a little bit more challenging this time around. But again, it's completely up to them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause it on a cliffhanger right here since you're all going to get access to this in November. And I'm actually going to move on to the final step, which is scene completion. And as you can see, we give the student the option to either view the scene again or to move on to the next scene. And they're also going to be able to share their progress on their social media networks. And this is actually a great promotional feature for your library because the post will automatically include the name of your branch. So, for example, the post will say something along the lines of, "I just completed scene 1 of Kung Fu Dunk with Mango Premiere at ABC Library." And this is just one of the ways that Mango is committed to helping you promote your resources to the community. So that concludes our demo of Mango Premiere. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to the presentation.